Welcome to the Saints of City and Me, a podcast delivering audio love letters to and from the city of New Orleans and its New Orleans Saints. I'm one of your hosts, Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend, Mike. This episode, we are absolutely delighted to welcome on board a man who needs no introduction, Jeff Duncan, writer, author, has been covering the Saints for a long time, been in New Orleans for a long time. Jeff, absolutely delighted to have you on. How are you doing?
Dan, I'm doing great. Glad to finally hook up on the podcast, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys today.
No, it's brilliant to have you on,
really
Jeff.
excited to have you
very
on.
much. Yeah, I suppose we'll go down a pathway of obviously different subjects, but I suppose we ought to touch on the Saints. We're sort of outside of the bubble as far as, being in the city and seeing reactions that way. But obviously in this day and age with social media, I think Saints Twitter this week has outdone itself. It's been incredible. You have to sometimes you have to just turn away from it because it's, there are people eating themselves on Twitter. But from your point of view, Jeff, what do you think's going on at the moment? Obviously, they've had a mini break as such to try and, get together and sort of try and correct some things. But in your opinion, what do you think's going on?
Well, I tell you, if you're a Saints fan, I would be encouraged by what has been coming out of the locker room this week. I spent a lot of time talking to players and coaches, and I really do think this is kind of a tipping point that the team has reached. It's kind of a do or die, now or never type of week. And my column this week is about how the team, as the leaders, have kind of taken ownership of this situation. A lot of players meeting on their own, a lot of coaches meeting with players. There's a real sense of urgency to get the ship righted. And I think that's encouraging. Now, it's got to obviously manifest itself into on-field improvement. But the fact is the team's coming together. It's not splintering and pulling apart. And, talking to guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Cam Jordan, Mike Thomas, these guys have been on a lot of teams over the years, and it can go one way or the other. And I feel like this team is coming together and has a real good chance to get over the hump. And the best news of all, of course, as we all know, is they're in a division where everything's still right in front of them, right? I mean, no one's running away with the NFC South. So if they, you feel like the Saints, if they can just get the Saints right, they'll be okay. And so really, I think it's more an internal focus right now of trying to correct some of their mistakes. Whether they can get it done or not, I don't know, but I like the attitude and the mindset that they're taking into this. They're facing it really head on.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and to have leaders emerge from it. Obviously we've got the established leaders that we knew were there, but these kind of situations bring other characters up, don't they? And you really see, I don't want to use the phrase cream rises to the top, but those leaders, those people who've got instinctively can lead people, will rise to the occasion. They'll pull people through. And I think maybe a good example of that, not so much a player, but was when Dennis Allen came out and said that Ronald Curry came out and tried to G the players up at that halftime talk, which he normally wouldn't do. So that shows that the people really want to grab it by the bootstraps and pull it up and make something happen, despite all the frustrations from what's going on the field. Yeah,
look, and I think this, Drew Brees and Sean Payton were such, generational leaders, right? They dominated this franchise for a decade and a half. And when they left, there was an understandable kind of void, a vacuum. And younger players like Alvin Kamara and Mike Thomas they were star players, but they weren't necessarily leaders in the locker room. That was what Drew was such a dominant force, and everyone looked up to him as an alpha. They had to kind of find their way as leaders. And I think what's happening is they're finding their footing in that area. Mike Thomas was a guy 4 or 5 years ago would never be leading any team, but he's definitely stepped into that position with this team now. He's now, 30 years old. And I think he realizes people are looking at him. Young receivers like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed look to him for guidance, and he's really embraced that role that he probably didn't feel comfortable doing 4 or 5 years ago. So I think it's a natural evolution of a team, And if you read a lot of psychology books and business books, I mean, it's very simple. What we're seeing here is a lot of team building. I think the unusual thing is I think a lot of us thought it would happen sooner than this, maybe in training camp, right? Or week 2. But the fact that we're almost halfway through the season is a little disappointing, but at least it is happening as opposed to not at all.
Yeah.
Do you think
on that? Sorry, go on, Dad.
I was going to say, Jeff, do you think that, I know Derek Carr's had a lot of pressure or criticism recently. Do you think some of these skill position players are taking it upon themselves to say, do you know what, we need to step in here and take some pressure off our quarterback by leading from the front as well? Whereas normally you would expect the QB to be leading, but obviously Derek's had a lot of focus on him the last couple of weeks. Could that be
I could not agree with you more. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, Dan. I mean, like Derek Carr, I think naturally being the quarterback, everyone thinks should lead the team. I think Derek Carr's almost, his own worst enemy in that he's trying to do everything right. And I think stepping into this veteran team that already has a bunch of alpha male leaders, guys that have been the leaders for this team for a year or two, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Mike Thomas, Alvin Kamara, all those guys that we're talking about, Eric McCoy. I think he was trying to fit in. And you're exactly right. Talking to Mike Thomas today, Mike Thomas said, look, we've got to support Derek Carr. I mean, we've got to make it work, all of us together, and we've got to prop each other up instead of like letting maybe outside noise, as they say, tear us apart. We can't get into that. And I've been encouraged by what I've seen. Look, if they don't win Sunday, it won't be because they're not focused and they're not all in. I mean, this is one of those games you can just tell everyone's locked in. They know they got to get a win. They're not going to be overlooking anybody. So if they lose, it'll strictly be because I think they didn't execute or play as well as the opponent. It's not going to be because of their mindset.
Yeah, it's good to know. Good to hear.
Yeah, it was. It's what I think that when we had a pod last week, Jeff, and Dan was touching on it. It's at the moment there's a blame game going on, and that's always the case. It's almost like there's always going to be one individual responsible, whether it's the head coach, the OC, and I think Dan put his finger on it last week. Is that I think everybody is to blame in this situation. I don't think it's one individual. I think everybody has got a reason for a finger to be pointed at them, not just one individual. And as you were saying, it's good to hear that that's coming out the locker room, that they're all gathering around each other. And you just need it. It just needs it's almost like, it sounds so simple, but it's almost like it needs to click, and it just hasn't yet. And sometimes you just need a breakout game for that to happen. I know we had the Patriots game and that was enjoyable, but that was still a little bit clunky in that game. The Patriots obviously weren't great, and it just feels like you need everything to click in one game for almost, because we were talking last week, people's confidence must be down as well. We were talking about Blake Groupie, who obviously another person who's getting a lot of criticism at the moment, but we could hear it over here on the broadcast in the UK that even when he comes out, there's an energy in the arena which must really constrict him as well, where he feels it as well. And that's not going to help somebody who obviously has missed a couple of kicks in a couple of weeks. And so the additional pressure is there. So it's just a collective response, isn't it? Which is, from what you're saying, sounds like it's happening in the locker room. And let's hope they can take that onto the field.
Yeah, look, I think confidence is key right now. And I think you make a good point. Like, I think the team needs to start fast in this game against the Colts. And, just have some success early, especially offensively. I mean, the last 2 games, they've been in catch-up mode almost from the opening kickoff. And you're trying to catch up and you start pressing, and we see some of the frustration boil over. And, I think a quick start wouldn't surprise me if we were laughing about it after practice today, but wouldn't surprise me if they tried a trick play of all teams, the Colts, right? So maybe the onside kick or, the ambush. But, I think they need something to get some mojo going and get some confidence and kind of get back on track. Mickey Loomis, I heard him say this week, one of the Sean Payton's like common phrases, he used to say, you're either in this league, you're either, in a rut or you're in a groove. And there's not much difference between the two. Right now, the Saints are in a rut, but it won't take long, like we talked about, to flip it over and get into a groove. They just got to get over the hump here, and I like what I'm hearing from the locker room.
I think as well, Jeff, when you get over that hump, you get the momentum behind you and the inertia, and that's what leads you forward.
Yep.
And that's what in this division, the way things are looking, that kind of a run of 3 or 4 games, and that's it. You could be out of sight from the other 3 the way they're playing. So, especially if we can get those in those divisional matchups, that's going to be so important, especially those 2 Falcon games.
Yeah, and look, I do think you made a good point, Mike, that when you watch the film, and I watch every game like 3 times, sometimes 4 times, watch the all 22. The thing that is a little disconcerting that I think makes it a little problematic is it isn't just one thing, right? I mean, that's what human nature is, just to try to simplify the problem. Oh, it's one player, or it's the play caller, or it's just the red zone offense, and it's way more complicated than that. And so I think you make a good point in that everyone on the team's just got to play a little bit better. If you watch the games over a bunch of times, you start seeing, well, it's not just Derek Carr, but he's definitely got to play better because he hasn't been playing that well in certain instances. But then there's certain times when he makes a great throw and the guy runs the wrong route. And then the next play, it might be Alvin Kamara not picking up the blitz. And it just feels like I call it whack-a-mole, like once they get one problem fixed, another one pops up. And that's where I think it does take a collective kind of mindset, coaches, players, everyone, to raise their level. If everybody just kind of raises their level of play and standard, then they'll get going in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think a fast start is essential this weekend because we talked about confidence. And, if they don't get a fast start and they're down by 2 scores, you just get the impression that regardless of what's gone on this week, just that the atmosphere from within will just dip again because at the moment they don't look like they're a team that can chase. I mean, they almost did last week. That second half performance was heartening. It really was. But you just get the feeling if they go behind by a score or a couple of scores, then that pressure builds again. And, that can be destructive in itself.
Yeah, and you're right. I think right now the Saints are battling a lot of almost mental enemies as opposed to just physical. I mean, they're pretty healthy, all things considered. I mean, I just tweeted out about how they've got like a bug going through the facility. So a lot of people sick right now, but for the most part, and they're banged up. They have an extensive injury report, but it's not such extensive injuries that should keep people out. I mean, maybe the only starter that's going to miss this game is James Hurst. And we're in week 8 here. So that's unusual to be that healthy. They're probably one of the healthier teams in the league, and heaven knows they're overdue for a little good health.
Yeah, the last 2 years have been just painful, haven't it, with injuries? It's as much as you want to criticize our record, when you look at the history, the injury history for the last 2 years, it's been brutal. And there aren't many teams who would be able to flourish under that sort of injury pressure. So. Yeah, hopefully they are. They've got a fairly clean bill of health.
I'd like to see the O-line.
That's one thing I always respected Sean Payton for was, he would never use injuries as an excuse. It was he just refused to let his team think that way, even though it probably was a valid excuse, right? Especially the number of injuries we've seen here the last few years. But he never would lean on that. And I think it was just more about the mindset of don't ever look for a crutch, whatever we got, next man up kind of thing. And I think they've kind of adopted that this year as well, that mindset of, hey, if it's, Cam Irving and Andres Pete at tackle, so be it. And we saw how that worked out last week. They played pretty well.
Yeah, they absolutely did.
He did look good, Irving. I wonder whether that's just, he comes in and he hasn't had the previous 7 or 6 weeks of focus on the O-line. He comes in pretty unscathed and mentally he's quite comfortable stepping in. But I would like to see a few games with a healthy O-line starting consistently, all five players. I think that will go a long way because that was the original complaint, wasn't it? Everyone originally was going, it's the O-line, and then that picks up, it's something else. It just goes to your point, Jeff, is whack-a-mole. It's like, if it's not the O-line, it's the OC, it's QB, it's head coach, it's all over the place. Yeah.
It reminds me a little of the one thing that does concern me a little bit is it does remind me a lot of the pre-Payton and Brees era. Like I've said this before on a couple of podcasts, it does remind me a little of those Jim Haslett Saints teams in that they're talented and they can kind of tease you with their talent. You see it and you're like, wow, if they can just get it together, you can see, or they'll rise up and put it together and beat one of the better teams in the league. And you're like, well, there's the potential in that team, but they just can't consistently keep it together.
No.
That's what those Haslett teams were like. I mean, they would beat the Super Bowl champion Rams one week, and then they'd lose to the Lions the next. And this team kind of reminds me of that. So I'm hoping that the leaders on this team, because there's a bunch of strong leaders on this team, that they are the ones that are going to take ownership and try to hold the rest of the locker room accountable to the standard that's been set, because that's what it's going to take. Everyone wants to blame the coaches, but really it's a player-run league, and they've got to hold everyone else accountable.
I think when you look at our leaders as well, I think we touched on it, a lot of them are skill position players as well, so they can lead by example as well as lead as men. So it's like, I can lead you and pull you up, but also look at what I'm doing on the field, and that can hopefully inspire you as well. Like, Mike Thomas makes a contested catch and he gets up and he's pumped up, and that hopefully galvanizes everyone to say, look, he's doing it, we can all do it as well. And just give me a Jimmy Graham touchdown in the red zone, and I'll be happy as Larry.
Jeff, I think the only reason Dan's saying that is he's probably going to put a bet on Jimmy Graham this week.
I'm going to bet on John Johnson this week, but
all right,
that's a good bet. Yeah. I would recommend that to a lot of fantasy football owners or just punters in general. I think Johnson's going to have a big game.
Yeah,
so I was all in on him preseason, Jeff. I've drafted him in so many fantasy leagues, and I was telling all my non-Saints friends, like, John Johnson, you've got to get John Johnson. He's a tight end to draft this year, and they were like looking at me and going,
"Yeah,
really?" I was like, "No, he'll come good. He'll come good. He'll come good."
Yeah, I feel like this week going to be a big week for him, and look, it's kind of now or never. I really think like they can't go to 3-5. I think that's too deep a hole, even in this division. There's too many other pitfalls down the road. But I just think, if nothing else, they just need to play better and get some more confidence, like we said.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I was going to... So go on, Mike.
No, I was going to literally say, just with a little bit of excitement, just some enjoyment. You want to see, when you watch football, you want to have some enjoyment. Hey, look, wins and losses, they're going to come, both of those. But actually, even a loss, if you get some sort of enjoyable football, you can take something from that. Whereas at the moment, we go back to maybe the Bucks game. That was just painful watching that, because nothing was going right and we were getting beaten. So there was just no enjoyment. Nobody performed. And that's a horrible feeling as a fan, when you're getting no enjoyment from a sport, win or lose. So, yeah, Dan, you were saying,
great point, Mike. And I've said this before. The one thing that I think does differentiate the Sean Payton teams from these Dennis Allen-led teams was Payton, even when they were losing, right, those 7 and 9 years where they were kind of wandering the desert with their defense, they were still fun to watch. They still moved the ball up and down the field. In New Orleans, you all know this. You've been here a bunch of times and experienced the culture. People like to party here, man. They go to these games. They want to have a good time. It's an event. It's not necessarily a sporting contest. No. It's kind of like a mini jazz fest, if you will.
Yeah.
And so people want to go have a good time. And when you're kicking a bunch of field goals and you're losing 16-19, I mean, it's not fun.
No.
And so I think this style of play that Dennis Allen has, he's a defensive-minded coach. That's the way they're going to live. There's no doubt. But it would be nice if they were just a little more exciting. And I think fans would, even if they left the game and lost 36-34, they might feel a little better than some of these recent games you're talking about.
Absolutely. And you could see that from the game last week with the comeback in the second half. Even for a period of time, there was a sense of enjoyment and excitement.
Yep.
Because it was, up until obviously the final drive, it was actually a very good comeback. The defense played out their skin in the second half, unfortunately, up until, allowing the touchdown. But the offense, it was exciting. And it's been a while since you watched the Saints and got that little sort of tingle of excitement watching them. Even in the victories they've had, they've been very workmanlike, the victories they'd had up until that point. So yeah, let's just have a bit of fun. Let's hope we get a win as well.
Well, I'm sure that's the same for Jeff, you guys in the press box as well. You don't want to write like stories about games you haven't enjoyed watching, even if you're a fan or not a fan of a team. You want to enjoy the game you're watching to write about it, because that obviously is a more enjoyable process, I imagine, writing about wins than it is around losses.
No, well, 100%, no question. I tell people all the time, I'm kind of rooting for myself a little bit. I'm rooting for the game to be exciting. I'm rooting for the story, kind of, right? I don't really have anything invested in whether the Saints win or lose. I'm just kind of try to stay neutral, but I'm always rooting for the story. So I'll be honest with you, when the Saints were in the Super Bowl, I was rooting for the Saints just because it was a much better story, right? It was a great story for our city. It was a great story for, I think for the NFL. I was definitely rooting in that game for the Saints to win just because it was a much better story. The Colts win. I mean, it's bad for our market. It's bad for, our newspaper. So I definitely was rooting for the better story there. And that's just how you go into the games. Otherwise I don't get emotional. One thing I've learned, and you mentioned Twitter earlier. I mean, one thing I can distinctly remember, I got on Twitter pretty early. I think 2009 was the first year I was on. And I don't even know, I've never counted up how many people I blocked. But I guarantee you 98% of them were in like the first year or two. And I didn't realize back then, I mean, you had to understand on Sundays, on game days, you have to give people a lot of wide berth. I mean, it's emotional. People say things, they're out of their living minds on game day. Normally rational, logical people act crazy during the game because it's emotional. And back then I would be, this person's cussing me out or they're vulgar. I'm not taking that. And I would block them. I let people just vent because that's kind of what they're doing in social media during a game. I don't think I blocked anybody, and I bet it's been 5, maybe a decade. It's been a long time. Because I've learned that, you have to let people run the course of going through an emotional experience like that. And that's what I love about Saints fans in New Orleans and Louisiana in general. When I moved here, I didn't know that the Saints had this passionate following. I mean, they were kind of an also-ran. When I moved to New Orleans in 99, I came here to cover LSU. So I actually moved to Baton Rouge. That was my first job. I knew about the Steelers having passionate fans and the Kansas City Chiefs and the Packers, but I had no idea what I was getting into when I started covering the Saints. And it's the best thing by far in covering the team is the passion that the fans have. I mean, it's unbelievable. Everything you write is devoured by the fans here. And everything is like this, though. It's that line that Sean Payton talks about. It's that Bill Parcells line. Every weekend's either a crisis or a carnival. That's exactly what it's like. If they win, it's a carnival. If they lose, it's a total crisis. But people care. The worst thing is to cover a team or a beat where people don't care. And that's certainly not the case here.
You've segued into a question we had. So I had a question here that I'd written down around training camp, and there was a lot of hype from a lot of other writers. And I remember at the time, it might be even been the joint practices with San Diego, and people saying, "Oh, we look amazing." And I remember you sort of said, "Well, let's just temper expectations a little bit," and you were giving sort of more balanced views on it. And I was going to say, you get a lot of criticism online, and you've touched on it there. People will vent, and I know from when I spoke to you when you was in London, people always bring up stuff from like 10 years ago and things like that. And, we talked about it and you were fairly open with me, but I was going to say, how do you deal with that? Because people just will vent at you and they will criticize you and they'll bring up stuff which isn't even relevant to now. And they're just like, "Oh, I'm going to talk about, Bounty Gate, or I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to talk about that." And like, to me, I don't even know how I think I'd just log off Twitter and be like, "Nope, I'm not going on there." But you just persevere through. You go, "Nope, I'm going to keep doing my job." And that's got to take some, you got some fortitude but you've just said that you understand it. It's the emotions of the fan base, and just let it ride out and let them vent and then reset and go again, I suppose.
Yeah, look, I use a bad analogy, and I don't know if it works or not, but I've tried to use this analogy of, I feel like it's my job to kind of keep it real and tell the truth. That's really all I'm trying to do. And that can go either way. Sometimes it might be the truth that people don't want to hear, right? It could be a negative thing, but like Bountygate, for instance, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it, the truth.
Yeah.
That's all I'm looking for. And sometimes it could be the other way. And I'll give you a good example. There's a nasty trend sometimes that happens, and it's not just in New Orleans, but I've noticed it does happen here to some degree, and in sports in general, when there's like a lot of tribalism with your team, right?
Yeah.
It's us or them. So one of the things that I always try to do is when a player gets traded, I've noticed this trend of like, it happened with Jimmy Graham, it happened with Brandon Cooks, it happened with Akeem Hicks. All of a sudden, everybody starts trashing the player, and they want to portray him as like a malcontent or a negative person. And I've always taken up for that player. I mean, unless it's true. But in the case of all three of those guys, none of them were bad guys. I mean, they got traded. It happens in the league. It's a business. So I would be taking up for Jimmy Graham, saying Jimmy Graham's not a bad dude. Maybe you didn't like the negotiation with the tight end wide receiver thing, but he's not a bad guy. So I'm doing the opposite there, right? I'm just trying to tell you the truth. The truth is Jimmy Graham was well liked by his teammates and his coaches. No one had a bad thing to say about Jimmy Graham. Drew Brees loved Jimmy Graham. And so when he came back, now everybody loved him again. But when he was gone, everybody was trash. I'm just trying to tell you I'm just trying to tell you the truth. And so my bad analogy is always the weather person, right? The weatherman. I'm going to tell you if it's going to rain on Saturday. I'm going to tell you. That's my job. And you may not like it. You may want it to be sunny and 70, but that's not my job. My job is to tell you what's going to happen. And so, it's funny. People respect the meteorologist that tells the truth. But if it's sports, we all want to hear hope and all positive things. And I'm just trying to tell you what I think is the best version of the truth I know. And that's all. And sometimes it does anger people, but it's coming from a place of honesty. I'm not trying to, and people say, you're a wet blanket. Well, look, I think the expectations sometimes are better when you understand what's coming. And I'm kind of kicking myself because I had some concerns about this team, and they're all kind of bearing out right now. I was concerned about Trevor Penning's ability to play left tackle. I was concerned about Derek Carr making this transition, concerned about where's the pass rush. I mean, there's a lot of things I was concerned about, and I kind of got caught up, and that's unlike me. And I think in some ways you end up presenting false expectations to fans. And I just try to be as realistic as I can.
Yeah. I mean, with pre-season as well, like obviously if someone's not writing for, a newspaper or NOLA.com or something like that, and they're writing for their own back, then it's in their interest to get those positive stories out there, because positive stories generate views and they generate subscriptions and things like that. And that's not taking anything away from people who run those kind of outlets. But it's a fact of the matter is you need to bring in people, and people don't want to read negative stories. So positive stories are always going to sell better, but you need the balance, because otherwise you end up in an echo chamber of great news. And then you get to a point like we are now in the season, you're going, how did this happen? I thought we were going to be amazing and win a Super Bowl.
Right. No, it's like it's not always going to be sunny and 70. And a good example would be the some of the stuff that I was putting out early about Mike Thomas, because Mike Thomas early on was struggling. I mean, and yet I was looking and seeing all this hype, and that's just not me. I'm going to tell you the truth, and I'm not going to do it in a malicious way. It's my job to kind of report the truth, and it's always informed. I think people need to understand when I'm putting out that Mike Thomas is struggling early on and struggling to get off the line of scrimmage and is catching the ball with his body and stuff. That's all coming from people in the building that I'm talking to. So it's coming from people on the team, right? Internally. It's not just me on a mountaintop throwing it out there. And that also doesn't mean it's definitive. That's just in that moment, he's taking some time. I think the first thing I actually said about Mike Thomas was he's going to need some time. And you know what? He got through that. And he's been playing very well. But it's my job to tell you the truth. Everyone else, it felt like, was just Mike Thomas is back, and let's just hype it. And I get it. You want to get fans excited, but it's not my job to hype. It's my job to kind of try to tell the truth.
But also with the Mike Thomas one, I think there was probably a lot of emotion attached to it, wasn't there? Because he had missed 2 years. You know, he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and you know, I think with Mike Thomas, there was so much emotion attached to it, and it was almost like a sense of everybody just wanted him to be back. So as you're saying, Jeff, you're hearing what you're hearing from the building, and sort of unsurprisingly, yet again, it's like in hindsight, the guy had been out for basically 2 years. Any sports star who has been out of their field for 2 years is going to have to ease themselves back in. It's not going to come naturally. You're not going to be, you know, whether you ever get to that person that you ever were, but you still have to attain a level. It's just not going to be there the moment you get back on a field or on a soccer pitch over here or wherever it is. But I do think the Mike one I think there was a lot of emotion attached to that, with just people just so hoping that he could get back. Not only for the team.
People thought he wasn't going to play again, didn't they? They thought he was never going to wear a Saints jersey again. Exactly.
And it's not even for the team. I think also, you know, from my point of view, him as an individual, you know, somebody who is so driven, who's so dedicated to his craft, that was ripped away from him. Look, whether or not he was partially to blame, the organization, or it was just the type of injury, but that was taken away from him for over 2 years. And that's what he lived for. Everybody can see the way that Mike Thomas is, you know. So that's his game. You know, he's so dedicated to his craft. So for me, I was more about, I just hope for his sake he can come back and sort of play at a level. And it looks like maybe that's where he is now, which is fantastic for both him and also the Saints.
Yeah, and look, you know, and the other thing I would say about that is, you know, I've covered the team now since, I started in 99, 2000. So it's 24 years. You know, we've got a lot of people covering the team that haven't covered the NFL very long, you know, so like I'm not saying anything other than I know what I'm watching, you know, like I know what I'm seeing. And when you watch a receiver, and I watch almost every practice with Bobby Hebert or Deuce McAllister, because I know those guys really well, former players. And, you know, you try and glean as much from them as you can. Well, when a receiver is out there in one-on-one drills, he should win 95% of those drills because he knows where he's going. The defensive back doesn't. So you have to understand that and know that, he's going to win every one of those drills. But when it gets into 7-on-7, it gets a little bit harder because the DB's got help. And then when it gets into team drills, it's even harder. So you have to understand that what you're watching. And sometimes I think the fans are, you know, if you're just reading social media, you don't understand that, like, he should win all those one-on-one drills with the DB. That doesn't necessarily mean he's all the way back because he's winning a one-on-one drill. A good example of that would have been when we were out watching the joint practices in California. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore was getting eaten alive in these drills one-on-one. Because, again, he's at a huge disadvantage. It's the exact same thing the opposite way when you watch pass rush drills. In pass rush drills, the pass rusher is at a huge advantage in one-on-ones because he's trying to get to the quarterback. He knows where he's going. The offensive lineman doesn't have any help. So if you know all these things, you can kind of portray it in the proper context. And I think early on, everyone was just putting up videos of Mike Thomas going one-on-one against some third-string corner and beating him, and everybody's like, he's back. And I'm like, well, that's not the way to gauge if he's back or not. You know, I just wanted to get that out there because that's also very true. Is, you know, some people, there's more coverage than ever. There's way more reporters out there, way more cameras out there than has ever been. I think sometimes for the reader and for the fans, it's hard to distinguish between all the coverage.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Just on the point where we're at with the Saints, it's probably, you sort of touched on it a couple of times, Jeff, about sort of moving to New Orleans in sort of 99 and stuff. I think probably the way first, how did you get into sports journalism? What was your journey sort of into the industry? Was it something that you sort of grew up and knew you wanted to do, or did you have a different pathway?
No, I tell you, I went to Eastern Kentucky University my freshman year and majored in wildlife management. I wanted to be like I wanted to be like one of those guys out that checks your fishing or hunting license, and I thought I was going to be, petting wild animals and roaming around with deer, and it was like comparative anatomy and organic chemistry, and I was like, get me out of this. It was so difficult, and I knew I could always write. That was something I was always kind of naturally good at. So I transferred back to the University of Louisville. My mother, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and my mother worked at the university, and so I could get a free education there and figure out what I wanted to do. And I came back and transferred and started going into journalism. And my older brother is in broadcast, still works in television news in Louisville, Kentucky. And he kind of guided me a little bit. And I always loved sports. So I thought, well, why don't I like to write? And, sports, I love sports. So it seemed like a natural, kind of marriage.
Yeah.
And my first full-time job was in North Louisiana, in Monroe, Louisiana. So that's how I kind of ended up at the time. Speaking of, was getting familiar with the state of Louisiana. Back then, guys, you had to kind of go where you could go to get a job. And my first job was at the Monroe News Star. So you just had to get started in journalism. It was much harder to get a job back then than it is today. And so I started out covering high school sports and kind of work your way up and moved around a little bit, worked at USA Today, worked in Nashville, worked in Florida, a couple stops, and found my way back here. But this has been by far the best situation, kind of what I talked about earlier, just because the fans here are so into it. Football is so big here. I've covered, and you probably remember this, but, during the Katrina situation, there was a lot of speculation on what's going to happen to the New Orleans Saints. Are they going to leave? Or are they going to go to San Antonio? I covered all of that, deep in the weeds on that coverage. But the one thing I always remember was NFL executive told me once that they had a map in the Park Avenue offices of the NFL. It has a map of the United States, and they had a light kind of on the map of each one of their markets in the United States of America. And they said, if you take that light out of New Orleans and there was no NFL team there, they said you would not have an NFL presence from Houston and Dallas all the way over to Atlanta. And he said, that is the most football crazy part of our entire country. They lead all the television ratings in college football, NFL. Why would we not ever have? I mean, we're always going to have a team in New Orleans, in the Gulf Coast area. And it made perfect sense to me. So when people ask me, were the Saints ever going to leave? I always tell them there's really two answers. One, they were never really going to leave because the NFL wasn't going to let them. But did they have some interest? Were they looking to potentially leave? Yes, very, very much. But it was never going to happen because they were going to have to get votes from other owners. So we're in this football mad part of the world, and it's just a great place to work for what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you sort of bounced around, then you ended up in obviously New Orleans. And so when you sort of first got there, but you were saying you were covering LSU in Baton Rouge. Was that first and then sort of made your way down? Yeah. So what was it like in Baton Rouge? Because obviously myself and Dan, even though we've been over to the city so many times, I think one of our ambitions is still to go and see an LSU game live, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, they're playing Bama when we're over, but it's in Alabama, so we just have to settle for it in a bar, I suppose. But yeah, definitely want to go to Tiger Stadium at some point.
You guys got to get to a game at Tiger Stadium. I mean, it's epic. It's one of the truly great sporting environments in the country. I mean, a night game at Tiger Stadium, especially an SEC game, there's really not much like it. I mean, I tell people all the time, you have to be really bad to not be able to recruit great players at LSU because players all want to play in that environment, the passion, the tradition. It's just amazing. So I highly encourage you to do that. My first year doing it was 99. It was Jerry DiNardo's last year. Everybody kind of knew he was going to get fired, so it was kind of a miserable season. And they had asked me after the season, after DiNardo did get fired, if I wanted to cover the New Orleans Saints. And at the time, I'd just gotten comfortable. I'd only been living in Baton Rouge about 7 months. I'd just gotten comfortable with knowing the beat, everybody knowing me knowing everybody. You know, see, as a journalist, you're kind of like, man, I just went through the transition.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I should move to New Orleans or not, but it was the best thing I ever did because obviously this is an amazing city. And I literally my first year on the Saints beat, Jim Haslett comes on, Randy Mueller. They go to the playoffs. They win the division. They win the first playoff game in the history of the franchise. So it was just this kind of magic carpet ride. And since then, it's just been amazing, amazing run. And I can distinctly remember moving to the city, not knowing, you know, what part of town to live in. It's such a unique place to live. And look, you know, I'm talking to two guys, you know, across the pond. I mean, it's very European. And I think when you first move here, you're used to living in other cities. I mean, I've lived in Tampa, Florida, Melbourne, Florida, Washington, D.C., Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville. I mean, this place is unlike anywhere else in America. And it's one of the that's the great thing about it, right? It's kind of an island unto itself in American culture. But when you first move here, you're like, what the hell have I done? I mean, this is the most backward place I've ever lived. And then once you start to appreciate the history and why things are different here, then you really come to embrace it. I always tell people, you got to give New Orleans time because it's such a culture shock. When you first move here, there's no way to take a left-hand turn. We call it the Louisiana left, right? There's no turning lanes because the city is so old. The streets are so old. They didn't have turning lanes back then. But when you first move here, you're like, why isn't it like the rest of America? Like, why do I have to go through the red light and circle back, you know, and all these things that the rest of America doesn't have. And then once you get used to it and appreciate it, it's magical. There's no place else like this in our country.
Yeah.
So go on, Mike.
No. Crack on, mate.
I was to say, Jeff. So we had the privilege of talking to Doug Tatum a few episodes back. Did you know because he's from Kentucky as well? Did you know each other before you came down, or he came down, or was there any connection there, or just completely two separate entities coming to a close proximity to each other from a similar part of the world?
No, I didn't know him at all. I mean, until we started working together at the Times-Picayune. Doug went to Trinity High School, one of the elite schools. I went to the public school, so he was this snobby elitist at Trinity High School.
He was one of them, Jeff. Oh.
Yeah, one of those guys. But no, I mean, he was an incredible boss, incredible friend of mine to this day. Done an unbelievable job for the New Orleans Saints. I think anybody in the building would tell you he's an incredible asset for that organization. And yeah, we both have we're transplanted Louisvillians down here, but there's a lot of similarities. I tell people a lot. I mean, the French, you know, basically the symbol of Louisville is a fleur-de-lis. The same way, it's the major city in the state. It's on a big river, the Ohio River. It's named after King Louis. So there's a lot of similarities. The state college is an hour away where the state university is. A lot of things similar. So it wasn't that big of a difference in that regard. But getting here and trying to learn the French influence and the Spanish and European influence, that's what makes it so different. What makes it such a great place to live. It's so distinctive, right? The architecture here, the cuisine. We have our own cuisine, our own music, our own culture. Everything's different in New Orleans. And it's what makes it such a eccentric, interesting place to live and work. I mean, in my job, there's this news all the time. I tell people we're a world-class city, but we're not really that big. We're definitely not a top 20 market in America, but it feels that way when you're here, especially in sports, because we have all the major sports with the NFL and NBA, but then we also get Super Bowls, we get Final Fours, all these major events come here, so it feels a lot bigger than it really is.
That's one of the things I say to people when they come out. They said they're going over, and they say, "Oh, how long do I need to get from the airport? Is it like an hour?" I said, "No, 25 minutes. If you land at a good time, you'll be fine." It's like a lot of people said it's like America's biggest small town type or small city, and I said to you can get anywhere relatively quickly. It's not like New York or Atlanta where you've got, if you want to go from one side of the city to another, it's going to take you forever. And I think it just leans into that. It's like a small town that's a big city at the same time. It's
Yeah, and
That's-
we've had a couple of people on, Dan, who have said the same thing that you said, Jeff, which is like it's a very European feeling city, but also it's got that Caribbean influence and stuff. So it's that melting pot of culture and just greatness. But yeah, obviously me and Dan would say that because we try and get out there as much as we can. So, but yeah, it's a remarkable city to go to, and we've spoken to people from America, not on the pod, but just when you're in the city, who maybe have turned up there for the first time, and it's almost like they don't get it. They're in the city, but they don't get it. And, and I think that sort of touches on sort of what you say there, coming from other areas of America and you come into New Orleans, it's like, oh, what is this? I don't get it. But yeah.
You either get it or you don't, is the way I look at it.
That's it.
But I try to encourage the people that don't get it is give it a little time and learn to appreciate it, because it's just such a incredible place to live. And I bring this up. I've written about this a few times. There's a French phrase called esprit de cloche. It means the spirit of the clock tower. And I think that does come up a lot with, say, Saints fans or New Orleanians. Really, Saints fans are just an extension of New Orleans, right? I mean, New Orleans loves itself more than any other city I've ever lived in, and rightfully so. It's an incredible place to live, but it's that spirit of the clock tower, right? I mean, what that means is in these small villages in France, it was the duty and the honor of everyone that lived in that village that was within listening distance of the clock tower that was in every one of those bell towers in these small villages. If you lived within sound of that clock tower, it was your duty to defend the honor of that village. And I feel like that's what New Orleans does. I mean, people defend New Orleans. We have T-shirts, right? And it's really much a tribalism or provincialism in this city, because it's our honor. We're so different from the rest of America, and we kind of relish it. We embrace it. And that's why you see I kid Saints fans all the time. Everything. Roger Goodell hates us. The referees hate us. It's that kind of provincialism, right? It's us against the world. And I think it's because we are so different. I mean, the rest of America was kind of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, from the Northeast that came kind of spread over the rest of the country. And we're this little island of Catholicism and kind of the rogues and ruffians that came over on the early ships to found the city of New Orleans. It was just a different way of life here. And I think that has stayed true all these centuries later. It's still that same kind of spirit.
Mm. And I think last week, Dan, we had Corey on, a friend of ours who's on the 28-3 podcast. And I think you touched on that when you were speaking to Corey about the fact that even if you're an adopted New Orleanian, you defend that city with everything you've got. And that's myself and Dan. We're a couple of guys who live in London, sort of middle-aged blokes. Well, I'm middle-aged. Dan's still relatively young. Pushing it. But you do. I would defend that city with everything I've got. And that's part of when you buy into it. If you buy into it, then you feel like you're part of it, which is wonderful.
And I would say you putting out Jeff from our friend Mark Daly as well. He's someone who, he will defend New Orleans. Yeah, he's from Melbourne, Australia, and he defends New Orleans like he was born and bred there.
Look, I mean,
which is my nice segue into. Sorry, go on, Jeff.
I was just going to say, we've got all kinds of flaws here, right? I mean, the streets are terrible. We have terrible leadership, but gosh darn it, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I mean, this is just an amazing place for all of its faults. I mean, it's the greatest city in America, in my opinion. And it's such an interesting, vital place. In Saints games, it's one of the few things I can think of in the city where you go and it's communal, right? I mean, I know this is going to sound kind of a big picture here, but you go to the games and there's people of all ages, races, creeds, right? Everyone's together on this one thing. We all love the Saints. It's kind of like when you go to Jazz Fest or Mardi Gras. There's only certain things in this city that do that, where everything's eliminated. We're all in it together, and Saints games are like that. I always tell the younger reporters that come on our staff, I say, you got to get beyond just the X's and O's when you cover the Saints. I mean, it's so much more important I did a series one year when Doug Tatum was my boss on the super fans, and I did one a week, like, Whistle Monster and Dark Saint, and that doesn't go on in any other city in America where you have people dressing up in costumes and taking on these characters games. It speaks to New Orleans. It's more about the culture, and it's a big business for our city. There's just so much more to it than just the football part of it. And I encourage our reporters to embrace that part of covering the team, because it makes it different than, say, covering the Minnesota Vikings or the Denver Broncos.
Yeah.
I actually
it's funny whenever we do that
interviews.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, I used that Superfan interview. I've got a delay, I think. I used that Superfan interview when we interviewed Max, actually. So Darth Saint came on our podcast, and I actually read your interview with him, Jeff, and used that for some of our material for the questions we asked him. So it came in quite handy for us.
Yeah. And I remember we went and stayed with him that morning. I mean, it takes Max like 2 hours to get prepared and get dressed up. I'm thinking, who is this crazy dude? Spends 2 hours getting ready in costume for a game, and it goes on all over the stadium. It's just amazing, and it speaks to the uniqueness of the people of New Orleans, no question.
Absolutely. Dan, you were talking about I think Jeff led you in. You were leading into your segue.
So we wanted to talk to Jeff. Obviously, you've been covering the team for a very long time. You've been covering the team since before they first came to London as what is now the international series. Have you seen? I assume you've been over for all 3 games, because I know you was over for the last 2. How have you seen that fan base grow internationally from Saints fans? Because we've seen it ourselves in the UK, but is it something that's obvious to you guys as reporters coming over, seeing the progression of the game in the UK, certainly from a Saints point of view?
Oh, no question. I mean, I can remember the first time coming over, I don't think I felt – I remember I was given the assignment, guys, to kind of do the story, like the man on the street. What's it like over there for Saints fans? And I couldn't really get a sense at all. I mean, obviously London's a massive global city, but I didn't get a sense at all of the game being there that first time. I ended up having to go to, I think there was like the O had some kind of New Orleans event where they were going to have New Orleans music. And I had to go to that event to find the fans, because I knew they would be there at that event. It wasn't like I could find them just walking around downtown. And by the contrast, the last time we were there, just recently, a year ago, you could find Saints fans all over downtown. It was not a problem. Everybody was in their gear. It's grown exponentially. And just in people in general reaching out to me in my social media timelines or emails, however they reach out, it's grown, I'd say, multifold, the interest level. And I think obviously the Saints gaining popularity, winning the Super Bowl in 2009, going on that run with Brees and Payton, where they became really one of the more high profile teams in the league. That certainly helped, right? Everybody loves a winner. So when I think when some, people in Europe were looking for a team to adopt, the Saints were good then. They were exciting. So it seemed natural for a lot of people to jump on that bandwagon. And I think it's only going to continue to mushroom and grow. I'm really excited. I think one of the best things the NFL has done is expand over into Europe, especially starting in London and building up that international following. You can see how successful that's been. And every year it seems like it gets bigger.
Yeah, I mean, you could see. I mean, obviously, we know from the London experience, and we've touched on it on previous pods, Jeff. Obviously, when the Saints come over, it's a wonderful occasion for us because the weekend lasts for about 4 days.
Yep.
There's far too much drinking, far too much partying. You age about 3.5 years in a weekend. But every year we also get the opportunity to go to the London games. Whoever's playing. Myself and Dan go every year. And you can see the game growing. And I agree with you about it, because they're foraging further into Europe. And obviously now with the games in Germany. In Germany naturally actually is probably a bigger market than England, for various reasons, obviously US Army bases and, and also when we used to have the league back in the 80s and the 90s, obviously it was like Germany almost sustained it towards the end. And it's great for us because obviously we've got Saints friends in France and, you know, Norway. And so it's great for us to actually build not just a UK community, but we're building a sort of a European community. So yeah, it's fantastic for us. And, you know, long may it continue. You know, I'd love to go and see a game in Germany, or I know they're talking about maybe having a game in Spain as well. Those would be fantastic venues for NFL fans to get to. So yeah.
No, I'm all over it. I would love to get the Saints to play regularly in France. I'm a bit of a Francophile, so I'm a nerd on the Tour de France. I love it's one of my favorite sporting events. So get me over there as much as possible. I love Europe, and I think we have a kinship because of what we talked about, the European influence here. I can't tell you how many times I'd be over in France on vacation or visiting friends, and something would come up, and I go, "Oh, that's why it's like that in New Orleans." You know, you realize the influence for whatever reason, whatever it could be, but you start to see it over there, and start to see it reflected in New Orleans.
I was actually in Paris this week, and as we was driving, whenever I saw a road name that was linked to New Orleans or a place, I'd be like, "That's a street in New Orleans," or "My friend has that surname." just as I was driving along, just popping them off.
Yeah, and also, Jeff, with the international marketing rights, with the Saints going into France, hopefully your dream will come true of more opportunities to get over to France. If at some point the NFL decide to have a game there, they've got. We had the guys from Saints France on, was one of our first couple of episodes, wasn't it, Dan? And they're so excited about the fact that the Saints are going to sort of try and infiltrate their market, and obviously that probably means great things for them because they're the biggest sort of fan base Twitter account in France, and I think John and Elio was saying to us that they'd already had interaction with the organization about some things. So yeah, long may that continue, and long may you get the opportunity to go to France to watch the Saints, Jeff, so you can tick off 2 boxes at once. Yeah,
look, I mean, I've had 3 trips to London because of it. Those I call those are the greatest boondoggles of all time. But I did have to say something though. Last trip over there, you guys can answer this for me. Luke Johnson, my colleague, covers the team with me, does a terrific job. We tried to go to a rugby match near our hotel. I'm trying to think of the name of the team. I can't think of the name of the team.
Were you in West London?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And we were out. The thing I remember, we tried to go after it started, and we were like maybe 15 minutes after the match had started, and they wouldn't sell us tickets after the match had started. Is that a thing? Is that common? Why would they not want our dollars or
exactly, your money? Yeah,
we were trying to give them money, and they would not let us in the stadium after it started.
I have no idea, Jeff, because I've never known that at any sort of major sporting event like that. But also rugby union over here is not doing very well, and they need all the money they can get. So even from that small sort of micro perspective, I'm really surprised to hear that. Was it the Wasps? I'm thinking West London. I'm trying to think of
the Wasps or Saracens, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
I'll get it and send it to you all after we get offline. We wanted to go in and buy gear. We were going to buy merchandise. We were all in. And we were devastated that we couldn't get in.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. So it's really unusual. Yeah.
I can get it with soccer because obviously they want to make sure they aren't getting away fans going into
segregation.
But rugby is not segregated. It's like the NFL. It's like you can sit wherever you want. So I'm really quite surprised about that.
Yeah, but I tell you what, I love London is just an amazing city. You could go 30 times and still not see all of London. It's almost the opposite of New Orleans, right? It's a massive spread out city, but I just absolutely love, like we stayed. I have a friend that lives in Woking, and she recommended.
Oh yeah.
The last time we stayed in Richmond, which ended up, of course, being the Ted Lasso fan,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
But we stayed there, and I felt like maybe what it would feel like to live in, outside of London a little bit. And
Well, I used to live in an area that was only sort of 10 minutes away from Richmond, and even before Ted Lasso, Richmond was a sort of in that area of London was very much a destination area because
Really?
it's got all those things that you want. It's on the river. It's got all those little back alleys that have got restaurants and little cafes. It's actually, but also it's horribly expensive, Jeff.
oh, okay, I didn't know that.
No, it's the funny. It was it because myself and my wife were thinking of moving there, and probably about 7 years ago we could have possibly afforded it. Since Ted Lasso, not a hope. Because it's made a major impact in the area. It's
Really?
It's made a huge impact. That I was reading an article, but I think something like I think house prices in London, which are always bloody going up, had gone up in like 4 years by about 8%. In Richmond, they've gone up by about 17%. So it's remarkable what publicity can do for an area, but it is a beautiful area. There's no getting away from it.
We loved it. And what was nice about it was that was when the Saints were practicing out at I think it was like the Irish
London
soccer.
Irish.
London Irish,
So it was kind of easy to get to from Richmond. It wasn't, if you're staying downtown London, that's a hike. But the thing we loved about it was, you're right on the river, like you said. It was beautiful. And at the time, it was before the Ted Lasso series. So it was a little more quaint than it's the way it's gotten now. I mean, it's obviously on the map, as they say. But the London proper, the stadium we were in last time, Tottenham Hotspur, amazing stadium. I think maybe along with SoFi out in Los Angeles, which we were just at, two best stadiums I've ever been at in the world. I mean, just an amazing stadium. And I love how it's just been basically cut right out of that old neighborhood. There's no real parking there or anything. I tell people here, if you get a chance to go to a game in London, that would be the place I would recommend, even more than
Jeff, every day that someone mentions it, it pains me because I'm an Arsenal fan, so that's Tottenham's rivals.
Yep.
And it absolutely burns my innards to think that I walk into that stadium and I think, what a beautiful stadium. Because it is. I think it's an absolutely stunning stadium and it belongs to them. And that really doesn't make me very happy. Dan, on the other hand, Jeff, you can see Dan's face. Look at that. He's a Tottenham fan, so he's happy as Larry.
And we're top of the league. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I'm learning. Well, last time I was over, not the last time, the time before, I think Mark Daly and Elliot, my friend Elliot Hurst, we went to a cricket match. And I got to tell you, that was unbelievable experience. I think it was just it was a lower level cricket match. I say lower level. I mean, I assume it wasn't like the national level, but there must have been 15, 20,000 fans there. It was like a social occasion. It was an amazing experience. So
I'm trying. I'm trying to think. If it was Elliot,
cricket.
Yeah, if it was Elliot, it would have been the Oval.
That was it.
Yeah. That's they're absolutely they're great experience. But yet again, unfortunately, from a British perspective, quite often they're just horribly hard drinking experiences. But they are hugely social. They are.
We
hugely
did some of that.
Social.
We did partake.
I'm sure you did.
It was a great experience, though. I mean, it's just I'm fascinated by all that. The next time I come over, though, growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, I'm a big horse racing fan. Kentucky Derby is big. I want to go. I would love to go over and go to Ascot, and experience that, firsthand. That's on my bucket list.
I was going. This allows Dan to segue into another question. Jeff, you're lining them up for Dan.
Well, you say line them up. So so for the Titans game, Mark actually came over to my house and we watched the game together. We was chatting because I think you'd done the call with the UK guys a couple of nights or weeks before, and he was saying that one of the things you'd actually quite like to do is go around and see different race meets and maybe write about them? Because obviously being from Kentucky, the Derby and things like that, is that something you'd like to do? Write a book around horse race meets and things like that?
Yeah, I've always thought it would be kind of interesting to see how horse racing, it's such a global sport. What's the culture like, say, in Hong Kong for racing or Argentina? How's it different? Obviously, Ascot's kind of the, seems like the ultimate kind of classy event, but what's it like in France compared to America? I'm just kind of fascinated by global sports. That's kind of the prism I look at when I cover what I do. I try to take a bigger picture approach. And but I can tell you, look, we're wrapping up a book right now, Steve Gleason and I, and I need a couple of years break, guys, before I tackle another book.
No.
Those books they'll take some years off your life.
Yeah.
So I've actually before we go there, I've actually got two of your books right here with me.
I love it. It's awesome.
I wouldn't just say to anyone who's a relatively new Saints fan in the UK, this book here, Tales from the Sideline, I think it's a really good book just for you to get a good understanding of some of the history. I know you wrote it with John Hendricks, who we're a big fan of. There's it's only short sections, but really good for a new fan to just get some concept of the history of the team and the journey the team's been on. This was the first Saints book I ever bought. And then this one, Jeff, which I'm rereading, which is actually, I've made so many notes on this. When you reread this book, Jeff, and play it back up against things that are happening now, there's so many things that make you appreciate how good Sean and Drew were. Even like I was rereading tonight and I got to the bit where you talk about the Traquan Smith touchdown for the passing yards record.
Yeah.
And it's quite pertinent because it is a fade route where Traquan was supposed to just be a distraction for either Cameron Meredith or I can't remember, was it Austin Carr or Josh Hill or something like that. And that's the same play from the other night against the Jags. And it's like, and when you read it, and I've got a quote here when you like the players are saying, no one ever expects that ball to go to that receiver. They're the fourth read. And it's so like, I would encourage anyone to read this now because you just get an appreciation for what Sean and Drew were like, and really, it's so like reading it again now so much more resonates with me than when I read it the first time. So yeah, definitely recommend anyone to go out and read that now because if you haven't read it, you'll look at it and go, wow, like there's so much in there that's really quite topical to where we are now. The contrast between the two things. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, that was a plug from me for you.
Well, I appreciate it, Dan. Well, you're right. I thought about that when I watched that play the other night between Carr and Olave, because I know what Olave was doing. He's running basically a clear out route. He's not expecting the ball.
Yeah.
Now he needs to run it out. So Derek's right. Really, no one's right in that situation. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, that was what Traquan Smith was running, and that shows you the brilliance of Drew Brees because he could just. And I've talked to him about this before. He's seen so many defenses in his life and seen so many alignments that the way he described it to me was he said it's like you come into your living room every night, where the furniture's all at, right? So if someone that day moved the couch just about 2 feet to the right and you came in, you'd know it was a little off. That's the way he would see defenses, but he'd see it like that, right? So he just knew right away that corner was in the wrong spot, and it split second, almost muscle memory. He fired it to Traquan Smith, but it's all that years and years of experience for him to be able to recognize it immediately.
Just a very quick one on my part, Jeff. About like I've also got the book, but I just like to say that I've got a little personal message on there from you because at the time, my 17-year-old son got in contact with you and asked for a signed copy for me. So that
that's awesome.
He was 17 years of age, and he was doing that for his dad. So yeah, I've also got that book. Yeah. So
well, and so speaking to your point earlier, Mike, about how have I seen it grow? That's a good prism, I would say, is how many books I ended up mailing overseas when Payton and Brees came out. I bet I sent at least 200 books, at different times over the 2-year period. so many people interested in the Payton and Brees story. So that to me reflects just the interest level of Saints
and the
fans
growth.
overseas.
Yeah. Just on the internet, still sort of touching on the international sort of scene. Just because obviously we know that with Elliot and Mark, and I think James at times as well, you sort of obviously you built up a relationship with UK fans.
And
How did you
and Ben as well.
Ben? Yeah.
Yep.
So how did that happen? How did that all sort of manifest itself? Because we know all the guys, obviously, like, you know, obviously, as Dan was saying, Mark was over at his a couple of weeks ago. We were at the game in London with Ben 2 weeks ago, weren't we? So yet again, it's all a collective group over here. So we're all sort of friends. But how did that all start?
We have to credit Elliot. I mean, Elliot and Mark both came to our first. I think we did a fan meetup in 2008, if I remember correctly. It might have been the second one, though. I'm trying to remember. It would have been the second London game, so it wouldn't have been 2000. It would have been 2018, I guess, when we were over there. We did a fan meetup and basically had the entire local media corps there. Jim Henderson, Juan Kincaid. I can't remember if Deuce came. I think Deuce might have come. Basically, we found a pub over there, and just said, hey, we're all going to be there. We'll answer questions, kind of like what we did last time. Yeah. And Elliot came along with Mark and Lisa. And I remember Elliot, as you all know, he's not shy. And after we got done, we were all starving. I remember there was no food at the pub where we had the event. And we were asking, where can we go get some food at this late juncture? And Elliot knew. And he, of course, is such a friendly person, went out of his way to kind of lead us to a local restaurant, just kind of hung out with us, and we just kind of stayed in touch after that.
Yeah.
So got to give credit to Elliot.
Exactly. Generous and flamboyant, Elliot.
Yes, very much. And he had all these connections to New Orleans, and it was very easy.
He's got family connections, hasn't he, in the area as well? Yeah. So that's
so I treasure all the fans that I've met in London. It's just such a everyone's so nice and so friendly over there, and I just think it's a unique situation. With the Saints have played over there 3 times now, and I hope they go back. Remember last year, you might remember there was a lot of rumors that the Saints were going to play in Germany. Remember that? I think someone even reported it. I think that's going to happen. I don't have anything concrete, but I do think they're high on the list here, maybe next year or the year after. I don't think the team officials wanted to make a European trip again, back-to-back years. Yeah. But I expect the NFL is going to have the Saints over there very soon.
Yeah, when the rumors were flying around, I booked hotels for both of the NFL games in Germany. Obviously whereby I could cancel them without any cost to me. But and that's yet again, that's fandom, isn't it? The moment you hear there's a rumor, you're like, right, I need to be there. So I was booking hotels in, I think it was Frankfurt I think they were both Frankfurt. Yeah, so for both weekends. Mm-hmm. But, that's fandom. That's what we do.
It's smart. But it's also smart. Yeah. You save on the rate, right? I can tell you this. One of the things we do as reporters, when the NFL schedule comes out every year, we try to get it earlier. Often we get it early. So we actually have the schedule before it's announced. And we're able, as reporters, to go book our hotel rooms in the markets, because as you know, Green Bay, Wisconsin, when they have a home Packers game, those rates go through the roof. Oh yeah, they're able to get out ahead of that and save some money that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, I'm mindful of time. We've had you on for hour and 15 minutes.
I didn't even know that.
Didn't even ask you before how much time you had available. So I don't want to push our luck if you've got somewhere to be and bits to do. So please let us know if you need to.
Yeah, look, I got a few more minutes. I'm going to dinner tonight with a former colleague over at so the next time you guys come to New Orleans, we've got to get together and go to Clancy's. It's my neighborhood restaurant. I know Mark and Lisa have been there with me. It's I'm just giving a shameless plug to the restaurant, but it's my favorite restaurant in the city. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood, my neighborhood, and it's just an amazing place to eat. So I'm going to be going there a little bit later. But I want to get my run in at Audubon Park before that. So let's knock it out in the next 10 minutes.
Just on that, based on the fact that obviously that we have to be aware of your time, Jeff. we need to touch on the book that you've sort of just completed, because obviously for a lot of Saints fans, you know, and I'm sure most people know that it's a book that you've written with Steve Gleason, who obviously is in the, whether it be one, you know, some people actually, is 1 and 2, whether Steve and Rebirth is the biggest moment in Saints history or whether it is the Super Bowl. And I think it's a fair argument for many different reasons. How did that all come about? How did that sort? Because obviously we were showing your Payton and Brees book, and obviously Steve wrote the foreword in there. So you've obviously known Steve for a period of time. So how did it all come about, Jeff?
Well, our time in New Orleans basically is coincided. I mean, my first year covering the Saints was 2000. That's when Steve joined the team. He joined the team kind of late in that season as a special teams kind of the JT Gray of that era.
Yeah.
And Steve was, one of the most interesting players. I tell people all the time, I mean, he might be the most interesting player I've ever covered. I mean, he was just a fascinating guy. It was from the Pacific Northwest, but, he was a very smart guy, eccentric, got New Orleans. We talked earlier about either you get it or you don't. Well,
Yeah.
Steve was one of the first players I can remember that lived in the city. Most of the players either lived in the suburbs or gated communities out in the golf courses. Steve lived right in the heart, dove right into the culture, wanted to explore the city. And so he was just a fascinating guy. And we became friends after he retired. And really, he married Michelle Gleason or Michelle Varisco, and married a New Orleans girl. So once you do that, you're stuck here. You're never going to leave.
Yeah.
You might leave for a little while, but you're going to boomerang back. I always say,
Yeah.
There's no way you're going full time. But Michelle has this amazing family that I got to know, and so I just became friends with them. And Steve's story is it's the most extraordinary story I've ever come across. Not only his playing career, but you just have to know him. I mean, this is a guy, when we tell these stories in the book, because it's his life story. It's not just his story with the journey that he's on right now with ALS. It's his whole life story. And, he's a tremendous athlete. He always gives me grief because he feels like we shortchange him as an athlete and try to sell him as this counterculture, guru. And, but I mean, the guy started as a sophomore at Washington State University and played starting outfielder on the baseball team. He started in both sports at a high level and still holds a number of records in baseball. So this guy was a tremendous athlete. But what attracted me to him was his natural, interest and curiosity in life. I mean, he would travel the world in the off season. So every year he'd come back to training camp. We'd visit with him. Where did you go? He'd go to Chile or New Zealand or, all over the world, surfing or hiking, doing all these things. He just had a natural kind of zest for life and was one of those guys that people gravitated to. That's why he became a captain. And so when he had contracted ALS, of course, I obviously was, early on in that journey that he was on and became really close friends with, everyone in the Team Gleason organization. And we've always kind of wanted to do a book. I've talked to him about it before, but we really needed to give it some time. I mean, we actually originally tried to do a book back 2 or 3 years after he had been diagnosed. He got diagnosed January 5th, 2011. But really, it wasn't the right time because he hasn't gained the perspective that he has now on the journey that Michelle and his whole family are on. So that's why it's the right time. And we were really fortunate to get a deal with Knopf Publishing, which is one of the most prestigious publishing firms in the world. They got the story right away. They understood it. They understood its uniqueness, how extraordinary the story is. And it's really a story about life. It's not a story about the disease. It's not a story about football. It's kind of a life story of how you deal with adversity, how you deal with challenges in life, and how you make the most of whatever circumstances you have come your way. And I can't think of anybody that's faced as extraordinary a challenge as Steve Gleason, and the way he still has this incredible outlook on life. I'm just grateful and honored to have been a part of it. I feel touched that we were all together working on this project together, because I've learned so much. It's really changed my life. And I think anyone that reads this book, it'll change your life. It'll give you perspective on, hey, you know what? I don't think anything's insurmountable that comes at me, because what Steve goes through every day just to live his life, to be there for his 2 children and for Michelle, and also for everyone in Team Gleason. There's a reason that Drew Brees is inspired, and Barack Obama is inspired, and Hugh Jackman and Bill Gates. All these people, Roger Goodell, they're all in Steve Gleason's orbit. And they're the highest achievers in their professions. It speaks to Steve's amazing story.
I watched the Gleason documentary on a flight. I made the mistake of watching it for the first time on a flight. I sobbed watching it, and I'm not ashamed to say that. And I've also several times I've said that Steve Gleason is genuinely one of my heroes, just because the way he, like you said, Jeff, the way he approaches his life and the positivity he puts out, it's just like it should be inspirational for anyone. And I personally can't wait to read the book when it comes out in April next year.
Yeah, there's one story I'll tell. One real quick story. This would sum up Steve, I think, better than anything. This was back in his playing days. Like I said, he would go on these trips, right? So he goes to New Zealand by himself to surf. His brother was a big surfer, still is. Cal is his brother. And Cal taught Steve to surf. So Steve started to surf on his own. He went to New Zealand. So he takes his surfboard, flies it over, and he realizes, New Zealand's a pretty big country. So most people would rent a car, like most normal people would rent a car so they could travel around and surf at the different spots that you want to go to. Well, that's not the way Gleason rolls. That's not his method of operation. Instead, he gets off the plane and just immediately starts going in bars and restaurants around the airport and asking people. He doesn't know anybody, right? First time he's ever been to New Zealand. He just starts asking people, is anyone selling a car? Anybody selling a car? He goes into 4 or 5, and this is a professional athlete, right? He's got enough money to rent a car, but he's very thrifty and frugal. And he finally goes into a bar, like the 5th place he goes into, and a lady working behind the bar goes, yeah, actually, I've got a station wagon that I'm trying to unload for like 1,000, whatever it is in New Zealand currency. And he test drives it, buys this jalopy of a station wagon so he can put his surfboard up on top, and drives it for a month all over New Zealand, surfs, and then sells it again, puts an ad in the local paper, sells it to get his money back, and catches a flight back home. Who does that?
I tell you what, Jeff, that's why that man is building a house on the lake, because he looks after his money in the way he does. Jeff, thank you for that. What a great little story for us to hear at the end of the pod. And again, I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for being so open and honest about your life and career. So I really appreciate it, Jeff.
No, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and we could have gone on for another hour or so, but I definitely have an appointment to make. But we'll do it again soon, and hopefully we do it maybe later in the year or something. The team's on a big run, getting into the playoffs, and we'll be under better circumstances.
Merrier times,
Yes.
That'd be great. Appreciate you, Jeff. Really, thank you so much for coming on and talk to us.
Thanks, mate.
Sure. Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
you.
Cheers, Jeff.
Bye-bye. I really enjoyed that, Dan. Thanks to Jeff for coming on the pod. I think he was honest and gave us insight, and obviously, at the back end there, spoke about Steve Gleason, the autobiography that he's doing. Virtually every Saints fan's hero. He's doing an autobiography with him. I thought that was a great chat.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I think Jeff was honest with us. We brought up some of the
tetchy subjects.
That some of the people levy him, and I think he answered it in a very honest way, in a way that people can understand. I mentioned Bantygate, whatever, and people go, "Oh, he doesn't even like New Orleans." I think if you listen to that,
Yeah.
you'll see that he absolutely loves the city and loves living in the city. And
I think
that hopefully that'll allay some of those accusations people make against him. Because I think I've said before when I met him in London, genuinely a really nice guy, really nice guy, and I really enjoy talking to him.
But also the thing there is that, you know, also, and he did, I don't think he specifically said it, but he sort of touched on it. He's not a Saints fan. He's a reporter that happened to come to the region, then came to the city, loved the city, and has been there for 20 odd years. And you're right.
4 years.
Yeah, you're right there. It's like
you don't stay somewhere 24 years if you don't like it.
No, and you know, that's you know, the accusations that are thrown at Jeff. One of them is actually he doesn't like the city, but I think if you listen to that, I think you realise that he really does love the city, not just likes it. So, which is great. Yeah. And talking about city, I was going to say,
hopefully we can have everyone again. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, talking about city, we're heading off soon, aren't we, my friend? We're over there next week.
Yeah, let me just have a look at my generic travel app, because I don't want anyone to know who I'm flying Virgin. I always fly Virgin. Let me see how long I've got.
Right,
it's great podcasting. This is looking at my phone.
Yeah, no. It's beautiful podcasting, mate. But you carry on looking at your phone, because, funnily enough, as I
4 days until I can check in for my flight.
Well, I'm going to give you an update. It's 2 days until I can check in.
Oh well, fuck you.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I love going to New Orleans and I love going with friends, but there is also a period of time where I have to have a period of time where I've just got New Orleans to myself, because a couple of reasons, especially this year, because I think I'm trying to think now, is it eight of us going over from the UK? Is it 8? It's myself.
I think it's six on that flight, that BA flight.
Well, it's myself, you, young Dan,
Alex and Dan,
Chaz, Alex, Steve, Miguel or Mike, and Aaron. So it's 8. Yeah. So there's 8 of us going over. Yeah. Everybody is significantly younger than myself. So we've spoken about it before. Dan said many a time on this pod that he knows where he's going to find me. And I'm going over a couple of days early because, one, I'm getting a tattoo with Jay Frost.
Yes.
So I'm getting that. I'm getting
previous guest on the show. Getting
that on the Thursday. And then I'm going to the Pelicans game, and we're going apparently into a suite where it is free food and free drink. I'm the only Brit there. So
Saints block party.
I'm gonna muller that. Saints block party gathering at the Pelicans game. We've got a suite, free food, free drink, and there's one Brit there. Hey, fucking great. That's me.
That's all right, because I land that day and I'm meeting Eric, and we're going to Dat Dog, and we're going to gorge ourselves on sausage.
Yeah. Yo. For those that don't know, Dat Dog is a restaurant and not some sort of parlor. I just thought
it's at that end of it's at the other end of Bourbon Street. That Dog. No, I'm joking. No.
You're going to the one in Mezzanine, Mezzanine.
Yeah, no. I'm gonna get. I already know what I'm gonna get. I'm gonna get the alligator sausage with etouffee and crumbled bacon. Nice. Actually, I say that they've got a new spicy dog that I've seen them advertising that I might try, and I'm obviously gonna get a pint of juice for. Because
of course
I have to. Although Eric has got some other gnarly barley beers he's picked up for us to sample, which will be nice.
Nice.
But well, I'm super excited.
So when you arrive on the Thursday, I know some of the other UK guys arrive roughly around about the same time, but they're flying direct, so they're going to have to go through passport control. So you're going to be in the city a little bit earlier. Some of them have said they may try and make it out to join you and Eric. Are you is that it for you? Are you then not coming out on the Thursday with everyone, or?
Well, you say that it's only 5 hours time difference rather than 6, and believe me, that hour makes a big difference. So I probably will come out for a beer.
Yeah, fair
Come out
enough.
for a
Fair
beer.
enough.
Yeah.
Well, I was out with my wife today, and she was like, "Right, obviously, when you get there Tuesday, what are you doing?" I said, "Right, I same as you. I've got a connecting flight, so I arrive at the airport just before 7. So I'm hoping to be at my hotel by around about 8 o'clock, and then I'm gonna come out." And I'm going to go and get some food. And I'm not going to go for anything too exotic. I'm going to go to, and I'm trying to remember, is it Copper Monkey? Do you remember where me, you, and Adam went?
Yeah, the place that's is it on
Yeah,
Conti? It's
yeah,
between Bourbon and
yeah.
Royal.
I'm going to grab some food there. I'm then going to
The
go
red
up.
beans there were good. Red beans there were pretty good.
I'm going to go up to the Aaron Rose, have 2 pints of Guinness. Then I'm going to go to the Bourbon New Orleans Hotel, and I'm going to have an old fashioned. Then I'm going to go, I'll probably then go to Frenchman and just sit there with a bourbon with ice or a bourbon on the rocks. Every time I go over there, I keep forgetting that I'm an American. I say, "Can I have a bourbon with ice?" And they look at me like I'm a freak.
Do they say there's ice in the urinal?
Yeah, blue ice. So I'll have bourbon and then listen to a bit of music, and then I'll be good. That's my Tuesday, but it's Halloween, and funnily enough, me and my wife, we're having a Halloween get together on Sunday, and she's forced me to get a costume, and actually I'm really, really excited about my costume. And then she said, "Why don't you take it with you and just go out when you get there on the Tuesday, because it's actually Halloween night on the Tuesday?" And she said, "Why don't you wear that costume?" At some point,
it will be the most boring costume in the whole of New Orleans, probably, because
it will.
Oh no!
You'll
be underdressed.
I actually don't think it. I don't think it will be, but the fact that I'm in the city on my own, and if I don't want to give the costume away, because I'll put pictures up on our Twitter page when I'm in it, but I'm probably not taking it with me, because I can't walk around the city in this costume, because I will just get picked on by everyone. I can guarantee.
Is it your arseless spandex?
No, that's you, mate, with your pajamas from Christmas 2 years ago. Just remember that, mate.
I'll wear them. I don't care.
Yeah, I know you will. I know you will. Anyway, so that, like, we get there, like, obviously we're getting there separate times, but on the Thursdays when all the guys come in from the UK, obviously you're going Dat Dog with Eric, they may join you. Well, then once I've been to the Pelicans game, because I'm getting the tattoo that day, I'll probably have to go back to the hotel after the Pelicans game just to do a little bit of remedial work on the tattoo. Yeah. And then I'll come out and meet you. But we've then got the Saturday afternoon, we're having brunch with the Saints block party gang.
You missed Friday, but Saturday we're going to have brunch.
I didn't want to give it away, but we
don't got to give it away. We've got some bits planned. It's been fine.
All right, so we're having dinner. Yet. Are you talking about dinner on Friday night?
We've got a few things we want to do. We're having dinner on Friday night with a very, very, very special person.
And we're probably having drinks or coffee during the day with some other special people, aren't we?
Yeah, just go back and listen to the episodes. You'll get a clue.
Yeah,
beautiful man.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful man for dinner and his wife.
So Friday is going to be a busy day.
Saturday we've got brunch.
Yeah,
then we're going to go and watch some college football with the Brits in a bar, get the full experience. Then we've got the Saints block party get together in the evening. I'm not sure if the location's been published yet, so I'll keep that.
No,
but it is a good venue. I like it. Nice place.
But also
Bama LSU while we're there.
Exactly, Bama LSU's at the same point. So we'll do that, and then without a doubt we'll do that, and then we'll, I think, as a collective, probably hit the streets and go out for a few drinks afterwards. I say as a collective, I probably mean just the UK guys, because our American cousins after being in a bar for 3 or 4 hours might want to go home.
They'll be like, look at these degenerates going at it. And we're like, yeah.
Yeah. But
Giggity,
also,
giggity.
bearing in mind that 2 of the people that are coming with us have never been to the city, so I think they probably want to get the full experience of the city for the first time they're over there.
So you taking Larry Flint's, yeah?
Daniel, I don't do that.
You didn't say no. You didn't say no.
Daniel, I don't do that sort of shit. That's not my cup of tea.
Okay, Alex will take them to Larry.
Alex.
No, because we're more. You and I are more corner pocket guys, aren't we? That's
Yes, we are. And there is nothing wrong with the corner pocket.
No, it's not. I like it. It's a nice bar. Big bar. Plenty of room to dance.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Me and you going in a couple of old bears.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously Sunday the game. We spoke to Jeff about it. I do agree. I do agree with Jeff. Obviously we're hearing from him, and I'm sure we'll probably hear from other people who are on the beat about the fact that what was going on in the locker room was pretty good, and we should feel confident about what was being said. But saying shit and doing shit are 2 completely different things. So, hey, let's just hope that they come out the traps fast. They can, if they can get a lead, that'd be brilliant, because I really do worry about us going behind again. Because I think, apart from deflating confidence and also the struggles we've had on offense anyway, get a start and build your confidence, boys. That's what I'm saying to you. Come on, let's do it.
Well, we're going to victory formation all day long.
You're going.
I've got to put my bets on before I get out there as well, because I can't bet myself.
Yeah.
I'm betting Jimmy Graham touchdown, because I've never seen Jimmy Graham score a touchdown in person, so it's going to happen.
All right, so that's going to be
Jimmy,
a big
my
bet.
boy. Jimmy is going in. Jimmy is going in. There you go. That's my prop. Duncan on the goalpost. There we go.
All right. So, of all the stuff that's happening when we're over there, what's the thing that you're most excited about?
Oh, I think game. Got to be the game. Not meeting all our buddies. Adam, Ryan, Eric, G. I don't miss anyone off. Dash. Just everyone. All the guys. London. Sherm. Elise, hopefully. All those guys. Just cannot wait to see them. Give big hugs and say, I fucking love you guys.
But there's again, same for me. So, we talk about it. People like Sherm, I've never met. I know, obviously, for you.
Sherm's a fucking blast. Sherm is a blast.
But you've never met.
He kept Nick entertained at brunch in Malibu, and she was cracking up. White Wealth, looking forward to seeing White Wealth again. Great guy, Chris.
Yeah, but also
how can I forget my guy, JT? Joey Plague.
No.
Joey Plague. I've said G. Yeah. Joey Plague.
No, did you? All right, sorry, because
Joey Plague, man who drove 3 hours to come and meet me in New York.
Pennsylvanian Prince.
The savant of Scranton.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. I'm super
amazing.
Excited about it, and
we got the stickers. If anyone sees us, we've got stickers. SaintsCityMe stickers. You see us, come and say hi. We'll give you a sticker. If not, they're going all over the carsies.
Exactly. If you don't see us, just go into any toilet or restroom or bathroom in the city, and you'll find a sticker. Because literally, that's all me and Dad are going to do. Is just walk into toilets. We're not actually going to have a drink in the bar. We're just going to go into toilets and sit there for a while. Is that right, Dan?
Just put a stamp down. Put a cent down.
Yeah. Maybe on that note, we should leave it.
That's probably not bad.
Yeah. And also,
I can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah. It's. I was going to say it's going to be a great time. I can't wait. And as I think I've said previously on the pod, I'm so excited about going, but I'm actually really excited about Dan and Charlie getting over for the first time. The other guys that we're going with have all been there before, but Dan and Charlie haven't, and myself and Dan are creating a New Orleans drinking bingo card, which should be good. I think
any surprises on there? Anything interesting?
No, we'll leave it.
Classics.
All the classics are on there. Couple of fruity ones that have come up, which I think you probably told me to maybe consider putting on. And actually, we had a conversation before we came on air tonight, and you were telling me to put what on, Dan?
No, I said it should be a bonus drink. So once he's done his hand grenade, he gets bonus points if he does that fucking shark drink they've got in there straight after. It's with Everclear in it, Everclear and whatever they put the shark in.
Yeah.
Like go in Tropical Island. Do you know what? One of my favorite memes, and it comes from like Neutral Grounds or something like that, was the one with the baby being born. It's 4 pictures, and it says, "Please let me be born somewhere tropical. Please let me be born somewhere tropical." And he comes and goes, "Where am I?" And they're like, "Tropical Island." You got a fucking hand grenade, and the baby. It's one of those babies where it's like.
I think on that note, it's probably a good time to end it, my friend.
Yeah, so this is us done for a couple of weeks. When we come back, hopefully we'll have either Dan or Chaz on. It'll be the equivalent of a live reaction podcast. We will talk to you about, talk to them all about everything they've loved about their first experience in New Orleans. Hopefully, if you're a listener, you'll be able to live it through them with fresh eyes. And, as our friend Corey said to us when we went to New Orleans in April and he first started following us, he said, it was, you get a new appreciation for your hometown or the city because you see things through these people vicariously.
Yeah.
But you live it through them and you go, actually, this is I live somewhere amazing, or I live near somewhere amazing. And these guys are reaffirming that for me. So we'll be back in a few weeks. Yeah. Don't miss us because we're having a great time.
We're going to have a good time. And thank you for
if you want to know what we're doing, check our Twitter, check our
Insta,
TikTok,
Insta.
Yeah,
old men using TikTok. Bye.